Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a newcomer, but actually I'm an all-comer because I studied in this program, so it's a huge pleasure and honor to speak in front of my teachers, Chagai and Idan, and in front of scientists like Olaf and Shimon, and in this presidential conference. Since I'm young, I would only try to entertain you a little bit for 15 minutes and see how far we get, but I'm going to talk about a serious issue. I'm going to talk about seeing with the ears, hands, and bionic eyes. And I'm going to talk about the problem of blindness. We know that there are 40 million people that are blind worldwide, severe visual impairments. And when I'm talking about severe, I'm talking about real difficulty to see anything that is on the screen is increasing in the entire world. We're talking about over 300 million people, especially with age, diabetes, etc. So this is also a serious issue. And we also use it, and I'm standing here, but actually I'm representing my team, and I hope to highlight some of the people that are contributing to this work. We are also will try to use it as a tool to understand the brain better. And I would actually start, this is just sound check. I would actually start with this. I think as a first slide it will be a little bit vague, but I think very quickly during the talk you would see where I'm heading. So the common wisdom, one very central thing that if you still open in 2012 any neuroscience textbook, is that the brain is a sensory-specific machine. So we know, for example, we have a brain-dedicated areas in the back of our brain that is dedicated to vision. Then here we have a brain part and lobe that is dedicated to audition, and we have for touch and the body, like we saw in Olaf's talk. And this is not just a theoretical thing and a theoretical theme, but also a practical theme, because, for example, we have the Nobel Prize, part of the Nobel Prize to Hubel and Wiesel was because of their better understanding of critical periods, and the idea that if you don't get an input to one eye, during a critical period or a sensitive period, you would never be able to see again, even if you fix your problem. And if you didn't got the input for both eyes, you would never, it doesn't matter what we will do, what magic, what medicine, whatever we will do, this person would never be able to see. What we suggest is that actually there is a different organization principle to the brain that offers some hope for visual rehabilitation, but to rehabilitation in general. And basically, this common wisdom suggests that the brain is a highly flexible, sensory-independent task machine. So the critical thing is, what are the tasks the brain is facing? And it will be able to adapt, but only with the right technologies and training. And these critical periods may be reopened and visual abilities restored. Okay, so this is the underground current of what I'm going to talk about today while trying to entertain you. Why do we have this strange way of looking at the brain? I don't have time to explore all the evidence from our lab and from other labs, but I will highlight one example. For example, what you see here is an area in the back of our brain that Idan mentioned. Reading developed about 5,000 years ago, and people like Stanislas Dehaene and Laurent Cohen found that part of the visual system in the back of our brain is dedicated to process reading, like reading this text on the slide, or book, or whatever. And this is, what is amazing is that it doesn't matter which culture you're coming from, what system, the activation will be highly precise, less than half a centimeter across the entire people if you do some adjustment of the size of the brain, etc. So this is highly replicable phenomena. It doesn't matter how you read, in which language. While you're doing the vision, you have the visual system light up in a very precise area. And what Lior Reich in our team showed is that when you give blind individuals that were born blind, so they never saw one photon of light in their life, read using touch, using braille, then it's not the somatosensory system that is specifically recruited. The information passed through there, but the main brain area that is doing it is the same visual so-called Wortham area. So actually, this is not a visual area. It's an illusion because vision is so good in doing reading, but if you read it during a different modality, it will be exactly the same activation. And actually, this is an image, if we show it to any visual word form or visual scientist, he would say this is a sighted person reading by vision. But no, this image actually is the group results of all the blind that read using touch, using the hand. So maybe the reading is really a bizarre example. Maybe this is just one example. But can we generalize it to other functions? Let's start in vision. And in order to do this, I would have to tell you one thing that probably you already know after Shimon's talk, but I think it's very important because most of the people would do a parallel between how our visual system works and a camera. Okay, so you have the lenses and you have increasing the light and decreasing the light, et cetera, et cetera. So the periphery is very similar. But our system in the brain, our visual system is very different. And it's creating, in a very active way, our images that we see. And what is outside in the world is only part of the story. So for example, how many of you, if you saw it for the first time, see, and this is, for 5 minutes, we'll have an interactive thing. Okay, so we need your participation. See here black images on white background. Just raise your hand. So excellent, you're not blind, so that's already good. Now, those of you who can see only black patches on white background, keep your hand up. Those of you who can see something else, you can leave your hand. So about a third of the audience can see here only black patches on white background. Now, if I will tell you to those people that between each two patches there is actually a letter, now your visual word form would start kicking in and would read this, and what is written here? Lift. Now everybody can see it? Is there anyone that you still can't? So you see it, perfect. So I can move to the next slide. So the bottom line is that something changed in the way you process the world and you create an image of the word lift here. So it's an active thing. Another example which I really like because it happened to me spontaneously. After that I read about it, but apparently this FedEx guy, so again you read this, you have your visual word form area working. But actually the guy that, so how, all of you can read this, right? Any of you can see, but don't say anything loud. Anything of you can see something in addition? Okay, so about half of the audience. So what happened to me is that you look on this and you see only FedEx, and then after 100 times, you know that I sent paper and they are rejected, and we send them again and they're rejected again. And I see the truck on the street and I just saw the FedEx. One day I realized that they hide between the E and the X an arrow. And actually they were winning a design award for this because it actually would tell you, okay, we bring your stuff in time, et cetera, okay? So again, and now those of you, did anyone here didn't see the arrow before in the audience? So about half of the audience didn't see. So actually, just like Idan said, at this moment, I changed your brain. Because now if you want to ignore this arrow, it's not doable. And actually, even more so, each time now you go in the street and see this truck, you remember me and this boring lecture. Okay, last example is this example, and again, it's dedicated, it's to show you that we have a dedicated brain area to process faces. But this dedicated brain area, it's not just that we have a brain area or a network that processes faces, it's a very particular network that was carved during evolution. And the brain actively creates this. So for example, here you can see that these two Mona Lisa, all of you can recognize this is Mona Lisa's, right? And some of you which have really good vision and active visual system might see some changes, differences between, we had here the ציור שבוי לילד in, to find the tiny differences. So, but there is some differences in the mouth and in the eyes. And actually what I'm doing, what I will do, people don't really believe this. Well, this is a known phenomena, but people that see it for the first time don't believe it. So I'm rotating only 90 degrees, and now I'm fully rotating. So this is exactly the same image like this, okay? And the point here is that now this is a really ugly Mona Lisa, and this is a really pretty Mona Lisa, okay? And even though I'm going to tell you this is exactly the same, now you can't see the ugly Mona Lisa anymore. You can see it's a slightly different Mona Lisa. This is because evolution created this network for upright faces, because this is how we see people. We go in New York in 2 a.m. in the 80s. We need to know if this guy is going to kill us, or we need to go to the other side of the street, but then maybe the car will go over us, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is that we actively create the images in our visual system. So if this is true, maybe we can use it to help to blind people. And I won't have time to go over all of this, but the pioneer of this field was Paul Bacharita in the tactile domain and in general, Peter Mayer in the auditory domain. But the idea is that you wear a camera. The camera would see instead of you. You would hear or being touched, like in Olaf's case and in our case, in an auditory case. And your brain would create the images, okay? That's the theory behind it. And if you would create these images, you would see, quote unquote. Now, if you want to see this setup, you're welcome actually to the LSEC and Hebrew University booth. We are going to show this as well as other technologies to blind, if I don't have time to show you all of this. But the bottom line is that using a set of rules, and these rules can be very simple, we can represent all the pixels in sound, okay? It's very difficult to understand, but so I will just give you, I would skip all this, but I will give you just one example, or two examples. So for example, here we have a very simple image. We have these rectangles. So if something is black, you don't hear anything. If something is white, we have sound. If the sound is in the upper part, you hear high tones, beep, beep, beep. And the sounds, in a way, represent the topography in vision. This is not how usually the auditory system works, but in using this algorithm, it can work, okay? Now, also concepts like if I'm fat or thin can be represented very easily. In this case, fat line or thin line, okay? And the fat line is longer in time, and as it got thinner and thinner, it's shorter and shorter in time, okay? So these simple rules basically give you a way to interpret the sounds. Can the blind now really learn? Actually, what I'm doing usually here, we don't have enough time, but I would actually present to you a word in English of scanning the image from left to right. Okay, so for example, how many letters we have in this word? I would play it 2 more times. Can anyone tell me how many letters? 3, fantastic. Can you tell me something else about these letters? Fantastic, you are very good. So the first and the last one is exactly the same. Now, since there is some hope, although I didn't do the training because I don't have time. Very close, very close. So W is the first and last repeat. You are fantastic. Although I didn't train you, you were able to read a word. By the way, I'm going to talk for half a second about bionic eyes. So bionic eyes is just tools like Hagai presented to go inside the system in some cases. For example, if you lose your receptors, and stimulate it. The most advanced bionic eyes we have today can do reading of 1 letter or 1 word after 1 year in several minutes, or in 1 or 2 minutes. So it shows you just how intuitive it can be. Now, it's not only what is on the screen, it can also tell you that this word is now up on the screen and now low on the screen. So where the things are is very important because we want to act upon them. And finally, it can also tell you the sizes. So if you're very good, you can hear it's the same thing, just smaller and cuter maybe. Now, more seriously, what can the blind do with these things? So for example, first they just learn the rules. They come to the lab for 40 hours or 70 hours. Then they learn lines, etc., and junctions. Then they can recognize this is a phase and this is a tool, but they can't say which tool. And then they can also say which object it is, and even which facial expression. So I would show you here, for example, just the gist of this program, how we teach blind to, for example, do, like I did for you, teaching to read simple things. In this case, this is a congenitally blind. Okay. Learning to, first of all, the features of faces in front of the computer.
וואי, נראה לי שומעים את העיניים ואת האף.
יפה. ואתה שומע פה אולי עוד משהו?
שנייה. נראה לי שגם הגבות מופיעות.
מעולה, כל הכבוד. בוא תנסה עכשיו להגיד לי.
העצוב זה השני.
יפה מאוד.
Now, then we move from 2D training to real-life training. And one question that people ask, if they are doing it, they don't be able to hear again. But our brain is actually amazing. It can switch in milliseconds from one thing to the other. So you can see that she is talking with us while she's touching Ella's face, while she's listening to the sounds in the training phase. Now she's not touching Ella anymore, the PhD student that leads this project, but looking at her, and she needs to know what she's doing. Okay, and she can even do facial expressions. So you hear this bizarre sound, now you can't say anything about it. But if you come to the lab, and that's actually universal, there was no person, late blind, sighted, that came and wasn't able to learn this. 40 to 70 hours. So not too long, several weeks. Depends how much energy you have. And now generalization, a different person will come, and she will still be able to do it. Okay, 1 minute. Just to recap, what's going on in the brain while they learn to do this? So what's going on is quite amazing. And actually what we do is, now you're experts on fMRI and EEG and TMS after this talk, we actually scan their brain while their sounds are meaningless. Then we scan their brain after 2 hours of training, so it's not enough to create new synapses. So it's how the brain learns, like you did, without creating proteins and synapses, etc. Then we train them for 40 to 7 hours and scan their brain again and in several other points, and we see how actually the brain completely changes and rewire. 2 very quick examples. One, this is again the visual word form area, that we shouldn't call them anymore visual word form area, we should call them word form area, because we do it in Braille. When the sounds are meaningless, these auditory sounds, this area is not activated. This is an example of one person. But now, when we teach the sound to these individuals, then it's activated both by Braille and by the soundscape. The last example I'm going to show you is the Object Recognition Center. Also from the Weizmann Institute, we have Rafi Malach that found that we have a parallel of the monkey ventral stream IT LOC that active each time you see an object. What's going on when the subjects learn to recognize objects, tools, this laptop, etc.? Then this area in the beginning, the activation all goes to the auditory cortex, and it's unspecific, but once we recognize objects, it goes exactly to the same network. So actually, we're talking again about a task machinery to decipher, for example, the 2D or 3D surfaces of objects and recognize what they are. Part of the effort of our team is to build new devices. So here we try to create, color vision for the blind, and also I won't show it via music. I won't show all the details, but blind can also actually act upon it very accurately, just like in vision, to develop new cane for the blind that can sense. And again, you are welcome to test it and train on it on the booth, on the Hebrew University LSEC booth. And finally, this is the last slide. We are thinking about using it to teach the brain and speed up the qualia that is being created by neuroprosthesis by combining it with this type of training, okay? So I would finish here and thank my team. I highlight some of the individuals that contributed, but actually all of them contributed immensely to this and other projects, to some funding agency, and to you for your attention.